After becoming a hot name in the second half of his freshman year at Wake Forest, and especially during last year's draft combine, Bobi Klintman made the move to the Cairns Taipans of the NBL in Australia in its Next Stars program, and while he had his share of ups and downs, he showed a lot of the upside that garnered previous interest. Listed at 6'10" with a 7-foot wingspan, Bobi has the pieces of a complementary combo forward who moves well without the ball, can knock down shots, and has the upside to defend a couple positions. While there's still a level of consistency and maybe an elite skill to be desired, the tools he has will likely keep him in first round conversations. Right now, Bobi would probably be labeled as a solid or capable 3-point shooter. He shot about 36% on under 4 attempts in the NBL regular season and 36% last year at Wake Forest as well, and I think there's reason to believe he'll land somewhere in that vicinity to above it in the NBA, especially when you look at his numbers off the catch over the last couple years being right under that 40% mark. He's a mostly catch and shoot guy who does a pretty good job of moving around the perimeter and for drifts and lifts in the corner, and he also took advantage of his opportunities in transition. And then mechanically, he's solid across the board. He's got a high release point with a repeatable motion and no real hiccup or major flaw, but I do think his shot prep and footwork can still be improved quite a bit, and the dip on his shot can be shortened. Now, given he looks best suited for a mostly off-ball role in the future, the shot is going to be key, and however you feel about him here will likely swing your overall judgment pretty far in either direction, but from my assessment, I buy him being at least in that average to above average range for all the mentioned reasons.
Champs and the ladder leaders in their last 2 games at home, just 1-8 on the road this season.
Now, what's my favorite part of Bobi's offensive game is his ability to cut and move without the ball. Now, this can be an easy thing to attribute to those who might not do a ton of creating, but for Bobi, it's a legitimate piece of his game that's popped in most of the games he played this year, and I believe he is one of the best in the class at it. He has good timing and feel and does a good job of seeing gaps on the floor and reading his defender's focus or when their back is turned. And whether it is a Maggette cut that's weak side away from a ball screen, or 45s, maybe a back cut, or even just kind of coloring outside of the lines of the offense sometimes and finding his way into a spot, he's been impressive. Now, there are times I feel like he should hold in the corner for threes a little more, but that's kind of NBA game plan stuff that should come naturally, and other than that, I've really liked it. Now, it might not be the most sought after or tangible skill in basketball, but it is something that's going to give him an easier time fitting into an offense and opens up things for the team even when he doesn't get the ball or anything to show for it on the stat sheet. Now, in relation to some of this moving and just being a threat off the ball, I thought he did a pretty good job of getting out and running in transition and converting on the other end. Sometimes it was in that grab and go type of way that we've kind of long been intrigued by from him, but I would say the majority it was in more of that same vein of just running lanes and feeling plays develop in a similar manner as he does as a cutter in the half court. And from a statistical standpoint, this was his most efficient play type and second most common by possessions.
Klintman, lijepo, Klintman.
Only 13. A Bobi Klintman 3 could change.
And then on defense, Bobi's upside is another part of his appeal as a prospect. He has good size and length at a listed 6'9". He's a solid lateral mover and projects to be able to match up with 4s and 3s fairly well. And schematically, he should be able to switch in the pick and roll at least situationally, if not more in the future. But at the NBL level, I thought he did a good job of matching up with like-sized or like-positioned players and also staying connected with guards, even as he's not the quickest laterally or in his hips or someone that's naturally cutting off drives.
Cotton neprecizane. 12 rebounds to 5 in the opening quarter, Cairns' favour. Adams.
Falling back on the floor. Biles to the rack.
Asher Nezamia.
Ready to go next weekend. All of a sudden, the breaker season takes on a total different look.
Ako zanimljiv igrač, odličnog šuta, dugačkih ruku, evo sada.
He's not super active off ball, getting into passing lanes or doing a ton help side, but he's at least capable of making a play here, and physically he has the tools. You take something like the game he had against Perth in December on the 26th, and you can kind of see maybe he is capable of a little more as he hones in here and kind of trims some of those mistakes. Now, with that being said, he is still a bit of a work in progress on this end, and we'll get into some of those things he'll need to improve on in a second. But I like where he's at as a type of team defender at the wing/forward spot that can ideally give you some added size and versatility when he's on the floor, and maybe most importantly was consistently impressive on the glass, which is a big piece to playing the 4 in a lot of NBA lineups.
Spent 2 seasons at Valparaiso University. And Noel turns it over. Klintman down for the Snakes here in his nominal hometown venue. McDonald spins his way.
Definitely want something that's got a lot of games. You can play yourself into form, or you can play yourself kind of out of the back.
Ide Bryce Cotone, sada je to za...
Galloway from outside, that one can't fall. He's been shooting the ball well, so guys are staying attacked. Here's Harvey coming off a couple of screens.
Tajpansa, Cairns Tajpansa. Starling on it.
Moving on to the improvement areas, we talked a lot about his defensive upside, but the key for him in reaching that is going to be in being a bit more consistent and technical in a few ways. The first is cutting out some of the lunging and gambling and times he'd take himself out of plays. This was a habit that hurt him throughout the season, and I'd imagine was part of the reason his minutes fluctuated. And then on the ball, he can be a bit upright at times. His closeouts can also be sharper, and the screen navigation will be something to watch. I think he's been decent there when you consider his size, and he showed some growth in his knowledge of peeling and rotating out of that when he was taken out of some plays. But if he is tasked with guarding like-sized NBA playmakers and taking on an on-ball role, I think there'll probably be a big learning curve right now.
6-2 Tajpansi. Hiram Harris nije prošao.
On the offensive end, just ultra aggressive. 7 points now.
Krasan give and go.
And then also connected to a lot of this is the foul trouble. He averaged nearly 3 a game in just 21 minutes, so both from a process perspective and just looking at the numbers, there's things to be cleaned up, especially heading to a league that's at least usually way less lenient on contact than the NBL can be. Now on offense, one of the areas of improvement that stood out is his finishing at the rim, particularly on drives or in those moments as a slasher. He's not the most explosive athlete, especially in traffic and off of 1 foot, and isn't the most creative around the rim either, so it has led to some pedestrian results here, especially in the half court. Now I do think he'd benefit from a more open game in the future with less congestion in close, but this is under the benchmark you'd like to see a player at his size be at percentage wise, and it's been that way for a couple years now in a few different settings. And finishing it up, Bobi also has a lot of room to grow as a self-creator. Now, that's not the reason that you're drafting him, nor does it need to be a huge part of what he does in the NBA to be effective, but it does put the onus on his shot reaching a certain level among some other elements of his game. He shot about 26% on limited attempts off the bounce this year and very low numbers on small samples at both Wake and the U20, so you match that with him not being the most comfortable getting to those shots and some of the struggles he's had as a driver while also already being 21, and those prior hopes of creation probably aren't going to be a huge part of what he does. But I will say, even though he does have some work to do, I do think there's upside for him to be able to make a play in spots, whether it's attacking a closeout or maybe shooting the occasional pull-up, and that's becoming more of a requirement for a lot of the NBA's perimeter play finishers, as I would call them, so that would be kind of the lane I would see Bobi fitting in most comfortably, but in the right situation, maybe he exceeds that, given he does move pretty well at his size.
With Sarr again, this matchup, the two next stars
Oh, that's it. Man.
On the board. What a day for Hildreth.
And then I actually went back and forth on where to put this in the report because I'm still very intrigued by Bobi's playmaking, especially in that team or connective type of way. His abilities here have caught my eye a lot in the past, so I was hoping he'd get a few more reps outside of the 3 blitz games, but they kind of asked that early, and from a coaching perspective, I get it, but I do think the upside is there. He's a good ball mover who's had some really intriguing dump offs, and I think he'll eventually be able to make those basic decisions off of dribble handoffs, zoom actions, or cuts, and also find a teammate off the live dribble in transition if we can nail down some of the processing speed for him, because there are a lot of times he'll see it, but it's either out of control or later than it needs to be. Now the assists and turnovers are pretty lopsided, especially for a non-initiator, so you wouldn't list it as a strength, but I do think it's an important piece of who he is when you talk about what he brings to the table.
Not happy about having a spell by the look of things. Come on over here, bro. You missed your free throw. Have a seat next to me. High scoring first half of the Breakers so far this season at 59. Previous was 50.
Is one of the first ones in the gym and one of the last ones out of the gym at the end of the day.
I am still working on some of this stuff, so it may look different as we keep going, but I wanted to add a little more detail than we have in the past. Now, the ceilings and floors are always extremely fluid, but even if it takes a minute, I think Bobi has a good chance of being a positive starter level player with roles that we detailed throughout the video. He'll likely land somewhere in the mid-first into the early second round, with teams like Milwaukee, Utah, and San Antonio intriguing me most as landing spots in that range, but Boston and Toronto were in that mix for me as well. And then in terms of comparisons, I think a version of Otto Porter Jr. to Taurean Prince feels right. And there's no perfect comp, and every player is a unique individual, but wing forwards with good size that are solid shooters and primarily team defenders and can also do a little bit on the margins everywhere else makes sense. I think the best version of both of them might be a little more capable as individual scorers, but somewhere in that same sort of vein feels right for Bobi. Bobi Klintman's combination of size, shooting, and potential two-way versatility give him a good chance of being an important complementary player at the next level. Now, it'll likely still take some time and be a process for him, with consistency being key for him on both ends, but to me there's still enough there to take a chance on his talent and bring him along as a player.